The House of Árpád, Hungary's First Dynasty, Part 2, 1131 to 1301. The House of Árpád was Hungary's first dynasty. It began with the crowning of King Stephen around 1000 Common Era and ended with the death of King Andrew III the Venetian in 1301. 301 years in total. In the first video, we looked at who was Árpád and the first 13 kings, the first 131 years. In this one, we'll look at the last 170 years and the last 8 kings. Each king ruled a little longer in the second half. Béla III, Harmadik Béla. Under the terms of the peace treaty between Stephen III and the Byzantine Emperor, Béla left Hungary and moved to Constantinople in 1163. And his lands were confiscated by the Byzantine. There, he didn't do too badly. He was renamed Alexios and betrothed to the emperor's daughter. For a time, Béla Alexios was the Emperor Manuel's heir. He called himself Lord Alexios, Duke of Hungary, Dalmatia and Croatia. The Duchy of Croatia, Central Dalmatia and possibly Samarium in present-day Serbia and maybe Bosnia were granted to him by his father Gaza. On Stephen's death, without a living son, Béla returned to Hungary and was crowned king, but not without opposition. After the Byzantine Emperor Manuel I died, Béla retook the suzerainty of Dalmatia without bloodshed, and with imperial consent because the Byzantine authorities preferred that Béla ruled the province rather than the Republic of Venice. If you think of the map, we have Italy on one side of the Adriatic and Dalmatia on the other. Now this is the start of 200 years of rivalry between Venice and Hungary for this part of the Adriatic coast. One of Béla's scraps with Venice led to Béla invading Haić. Believe it or not, that's in the Ukraine, which he gave to his younger son Andrew. Béla styled himself as King of Galicia. That's not the Galicia in Spain, but the one in Ukraine/Poland. Yet Béla was one of Hungary's most cosmopolitan rulers. Under him, Hungary flowered both politically and culturally. Béla is known for promoting written records and set up a royal chancery, that's an office responsible for creating and managing official documents. Lay literature, especially in Hungarian, began to appear in the court of Béla III. It was at this time that a cleric called Master P, known today as Anonymous, wrote a history of Hungary's conquest based on both foreign and Hungarian sources, written and oral. His Gesta Hungaricum, the deeds of the Hungarians, reflected Béla's strong leadership and the French knightly culture of Béla's court. So the conquerors were depicted as noble, aristocratic knights under the kingly leadership of Árpád. So not necessarily reflecting the culture of the conquest. After a fire, Béla had the palace in Esztergom rebuilt and a new cathedral erected. These were the earliest examples of Gothic architecture in Central Europe. Under Béla, the Holy Crown of Hungary, as we know it today, was created. It has a distinct Byzantine influence, but also includes a part of King Stephen's original crown, specifically the straps that form the cross. And speaking of crosses, it was Béla who would introduce two-bar cross as a symbol of the Hungarian royalty. It's not a coincidence that this resembles the cross used by the Eastern Church of the Byzantine Empire. At the end of his life, Béla swore to lead a crusade to the Holy Land, but was unable to complete his oath as he fell ill and died at the age of 48. Here's another one who doesn't have a proper translation in English. Imre, also known as Henry, in Hungarian Imre. Remember, Imre was also the name of the son of the first king, Saint Stephen. King of Hungary, Croatia and Serbia. His younger brother Andrew wanted Imre to give him control of Croatia and Dalmatia. When he refused, Andrew, with the help of the Duke of Austria, forced him to. However, later Imre added Serbia to his control and became the first Hungarian king of Serbia. He also occupied parts of Bulgaria. At age 30, Imre fell ill and crowned his 4-year-old son as king, with his brother as regent. Harmadik László. A 4-year-old boy under the guardianship of an ambitious uncle. How would that go? László was another 6-month king, and much of that time was spent in Austria in fear for his life. Andrew II, also known as Andrew of Jerusalem, Második András. His father Béla III willed property and money to Andrew, obliging him to lead a crusade to the Holy Land. Instead, Andrew forced his elder brother Imre to cede Croatia and Dalmatia to him. He then styled himself, "By the grace of God, the Duke of Zadar and all Dalmatia, Croatia and home." After Imre's death, András was appointed regent to his nephew László. Andrew stole his nephew's money, and even before his death styled himself as King of Hungary and Croatia. He also called himself King of Halach and Lomaderia. What sort of king was Andrew? Well, apart from doing his nephew out of his title, he was involved in many wars and battles, 5 campaigns in Galatia alone. He was corrupt, distributing large portions of the royal domain, royal castles and estates as inheritable grants to his supporters. Despite his oath, he failed to lead a crusade 3 times. On the 4th request, András agreed, hoping that he would be elected Latin Emperor of Constantinople. He wasn't. Andrew sold and mortgaged royal estates to finance his campaign, which became a part of the 5th Crusade. His army was large, at least 10,000 mounted soldiers and uncountable infantrymen. After one half-hearted campaign, he spent his time pillaging relics. 2 months later, he was heading home. Andrew's crusade was said to have achieved nothing and brought him no honour. When he returned to Hungary, Andrew was in massive debt because of his crusade, which forced him to impose extraordinarily high taxes and debase the coinage. In 1222, he was then facing civil unrest. The royal servants, who were actually landowners directly subject to the monarch's power and obliged to fight in the royal army, assembled and forced him to issue a royal charter, the Golden Bull. The charter summarised the liberties of the royal servants, including their exemption from taxes and the jurisdiction of the Ishbans, that's the counts. The Golden Bull clearly distinguished the royal servants from the king's other subjects, which led to the rise of the Hungarian nobility. Unlike the English Magna Carta, which was signed 7 years earlier, which strengthened the position of the royal subjects, the Hungarian Golden Bull strengthened the aristocracy. Andrew reorganised the fiscal system, basing it on minting coins, mining, customs and taxes. Much of the administration was done by Muslims and Jews. Hungary moved to a money-based state economy. But Andrew's employment of Jews and Muslims to administer the royal revenues caused discord between Andrew and the Holy See. One thing that was controversial was Muslims employing Christians. Pope Gregory IX authorised the Archbishop to perform acts of religious censure to persuade Andrew to dismiss his non-Christian officials. Under duress, Andrew issued a new Golden Bull in 1231, which confirmed that Muslims were banned from employment. Yet, 3 years later, Andrew still had not dismissed his non-Christian officials, despite his oath. Béla IV. Negyedik Béla. Béla had many titles. Prior to his father's death, he styled himself, "By the grace of God, King, son of the King of Hungary, Duke of Slavonia, and later Duke of Transylvania and King of Cumania." After his father's death, the King of Hungary and Croatia, and still later Duke of Styria and occasionally King of Bulgaria. Béla was crowned junior king at the age of just 14 by a group of influential noblemen, while his father was still alive. The senior King Andrew ceded the lands between the Adriatic and the Drava River, Croatia, Dalmatia and Slavonia, to him. 6 years later, Béla governed Transylvania as Duke. As Duke of Transylvania, Béla adopted an expansionist policy, aimed at the territories over the Carpathian Mountains. Béla set up a new border province between the Carpathian and the lower Danube, and styled himself as King of Cumania, 2 years before becoming King of Hungary and Croatia. In 1235, after Andrew's death, Béla's succession was smooth. Béla had long opposed his father's useless and superfluous perpetual grants, and revised his predecessor's land grants and reclaimed former royal estates. He went as far as having the chairs of the barons burnt, so they could not sit in his presence during the meetings of the royal council. It didn't go down well. He did back down with respect of land grants to the church, however. In exchange, the Pope allowed him to employ local Jews and Muslims in his financial administration. To Europe's east there was a terrifying force on the way, the Mongols, or the Tartars. At least 40,000 Cumans fleeing the Mongols approached the eastern borders of the Kingdom Hungary and demanded admission in 1239. They were admitted, providing they converted to Christianity and helped fight the Mongols. But after their leader's death, they left for the Balkan Peninsula, destroying many Hungarian villages on the way. The Mongols gathered in the lands bordering Hungary and Poland in 1240. With the Cumans' departure, Béla could muster an army of less than 60,000 against the invaders. The Hungarian army was virtually annihilated at the Battle of Mohács in 1241, not to be confused with the Battle of Mohács against the Turks almost 300 years later. Many Hungarian lords, prelates and noblemen were killed, and Béla himself narrowly escaped from the battlefield. The triumphant Mongols occupied and ravaged most of the lands to the east of the Danube. The Mongols then crossed the frozen Danube early in 1242. The only thing that stopped further devastation was the death of the Great Khan, which meant the return of the majority of the Mongol troops. Hungary lost at least 15% of its population, and in the plains east of the Danube, at least half the villages were depopulated. This led to Béla encouraging thousands of colonists from the Holy Roman Empire, Poland and other neighbouring regions to settle in the depopulated lands. He also persuaded the Cumans to return and settle in the plains along the river Tisa, Kunjak. Béla's efforts to rebuild his devastated country won him the epithet of the second founder of the state, in Hungarian, Második Honalapító. Béla introduced radical reforms in order to prepare his kingdom for the second Mongol invasion, which he knew was going to come. He allowed the barons and prelates to erect stone fortresses and set up their own private armed forces. Before, this was only allowed by the king. He promoted the development of fortified towns. He moved the citizens of Pest to a hill on the opposite side of the Danube in 1248, and within 2 decades their new fortified town, Buda, became the most important centre of commerce in Hungary. Then it was business as usual. Invasions of Austria, Styria, Moravia and Bulgaria. Between 1261 and 66 there was a civil war between Béla and his son Stephen. Eventually the two divided the country along the Danube. The lands to the west of the river remained under the direct rule of Béla, and the government of the eastern territories was taken over by Stephen, the junior king. Béla reigned for over 3 decades. In that time he reorganized the structure of government, re-established the rule of law, repopulated the devastated countryside, encouraged the growth of towns, created the new royal town of Buda, and revived the commercial life of the country. Stephen V, Ötödik István. Stephen's reign was to be less glorious. Like his father before him, he was given duchies as a child, and as a young man, King and Duke of Slavonia, Duke of Transylvania, Duke of Styria, but at the age of 23 he forced his father to make him junior king and hand over half the kingdom. In his 2-year reign as king after his father's death, he made an alliance with the Polish king, made raids into Austria and Slovakia before falling ill and dying. László IV, the Kun, Negyedik Kun László. Stephen's son László succeeded him at age 10, but was initially held prisoner due to palace intrigue. For the first 5 years of his rule, various groups fought against each other for supreme power. After his majority at 15, László could not restore the royal power. His mother was the daughter of a chieftain from the pagan Cuman who had settled in Hungary, and much to the shock of the church, under László, there were thousands of pagan Cumans still in Hungary. The church insisted they become Christians and leave their tents and live in houses attached to the ground. László supported the Cumans against the church, which led to him being excommunicated. Yet a disagreement led to many of them leaving Hungary. Hungary was then later attacked by the Cumans, followed by the Mongols. László's favouritism towards the Cumans made him unpopular with many of his subjects, and they accused him of inciting the Mongols to invade Hungary. Hungary's central government lost power. László abducted his sister, a prioress of the Dominicans, and gave her in marriage to a Czech aristocrat. Ironically, László was assassinated by 3 Cumans. Andrew III the Venetian, Harmadik Valenci Anrash. Andrew III's father was Stephen the Posthumous, that is, the posthumous son of Andrew II of Hungary, but Stephen's older half-brothers considered him a bastard. Hungary was in a state of constant anarchy during Andrew's reign. Several powerful families autonomously governed their domains, rising up nearly every year in open rebellion against Andrew. Andrew, who had been in poor health, died in Buda Castle on the 14th of January 1301. And this was the end of the house of Árpád. And that is a very brief overview of Hungary's first kings. Feel free to add the bits of history of this period that has made an impression on you in the comments below. I haven't covered everything, not even everything I came across in my research. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If so, please leave a like or comment and consider subscribing.